All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Chu. I will be chairing today's session at 1:30 p.m. on social security, rights and development. And we'll be going through to 2:30 p.m. today. And so before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather here in Brisbane, land of the Turrbal people, and pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So before we get started with today's session, I'd like to just go through a few bits of housekeeping today. So we are going to be having three speakers today. We'll be having 15 minutes per session, and we'll have time for one question after each session. And then after all the speakers have presented, we will have some panel discussion to round off. So for our guests who are both face-to-face, or for our guests who are online, there is a discussion panel where you can chat to each other. But if you do have a question for the panel, please put it through on the Q&A section. Otherwise, I won't be able to see it on my side. And for the face-to-face participants, you can also let Zoe in the room know your questions, and she will feed them through the digital Q&A panel. So, and the last note here is for our speakers to be on mute when they're not presenting. So with that all said, I would like to introduce Femme Sihite. She is at the Research Center for Climate Change, Universitas, Indonesia. And she'll be speaking on the Universal Child Benefit and other schemes in Indonesia, Papua. And I'll let you know when you have a minute up. Take it away, Femme.
Yeah. Let me check. Okay, I think everything's okay. So I will start probably sharing the screen for each. Sorry. Uh, yeah, thank you for this research. I will present on behalf of my co-author too, Sonny, and our research is basically uh, takes focus on a trial child benefit in Indonesian Papua, which is being piloted in three districts, Paniai, Asmat, and Lanijaya. And we will further review the design and implementation of the trial child benefit and compare that with other existing cash transfer that covers children, as well as proposing a new scheme of child benefit. And this child benefit actually targets indigenous children or Orang Asli Papua or OAP, age up to 4. And this is the abstract of our research. And I have uploaded the presentation prior to this session. And if you wish us to send a separate file, just feel free to reach us like through email later. And here is before we go, like we have assessed and we have compiled all research on child benefit from the children's vulnerability and then the child benefit implementation around the world, as well as the encouragement to switch from the targeted child benefit into the more universal one. And in Papua context itself, in a climate and biodiversity state, rainforests and carbon stocks in Papua are very rich, and Papua is the area where with one of the richest biodiversity in the world. In contrast with the climate state, in terms of social situation and economic situation, Orang Asli Papua or indigenous people of Papua will remain one of the most vulnerable social group in Indonesia. In a further context is that OAP And the province of Papua, in terms of poverty rate, has been consistently the highest, and the well-being is one of the lowest nationwide. Another issue is that the significant percentage of the population are undocumented with IDs, either with a birth certificate or single identification number. One unique fact about Papua is that Papua is under special autonomy, or OTSUS, with the extra funds from the central budget allocated to the province, as well as an extra discretion for the provincial government in the policy making to some extent. And in nature and climate, despite of the richness in biodiversity, carbon stocks, and rainforest, it's currently under a constant threat of, let's say, deforestation and land conversion as well, where we know that the forests have significant roles to the indigenous communities as well as the OIP. And here is the map of Indonesian Papua, where the child benefit is being trialed, and it's being trialed in three districts: two landlocked districts in Pania and Lanijaya, and one coastal district in Asmat. And here, before we go to the findings of the program, we will compare two child benefits or two cash transfer programs available in Papua. The first one is the Family Hope Program, or Program Keluarga Harapan. It's targeted and conditional for the poor, and the targeting is household-based targeting, not individual. And the amount varied depending on the size and the composition of the household. And another, we have the program or the focus of this research. It's named Bangga Papua, which is being piloted in those three districts, targeting the indigenous children. And the parents will receive around 15 US dollar per month, and it's funded by OTSUS. And first, we will apply the universal and unconditional characteristic of universal child benefit to assess the design and implementation of the program. And then we will further conduct the simulations to compare with PKH, the existing one, and our proposed child basic income funded by forest carbon dividend. And from the data sources, we conducted a focus group discussion and semi-structured interviews with the stakeholders, as well as obtaining other secondary data. And here is the issues with the data is that the first, we have a gap that PKH beneficiaries is provincial and household based, while the program data, beneficiaries data, is district and individual based. And therefore, we need to project the ratio between the population age up to 4 and the number of households. With all the limitations, that implies that the first, we assume that the beneficiaries of PKH are the same households over the 4 periods, and the households are dispersed over all districts in the provinces. And we come to the main. The program implies the ethnicity based and geographical targeting in Papua, targeting the indigenous communities and targeting certain age group. However, here the definition and identification method of OAP remain inconclusive, because OAP, or Indigenous Papuans, under the law is defined as people with a Melanesian heritage or other people that had been recognized as OAP by the OAP community. So the definition is open-ended and not limited to the certain ethnic. And we will go further into that later. And from the findings, based on the population projection, we estimated that 95% of the population in pilot districts are Melanesian. And by far, the pilot project has covered 75% of the targeted children, 100% in Asmat, 18 Paniai, and only 35 in Lanijaya. And in terms of conditionalities, yes, the program has preconditions before children receive the benefits. There are two. The first one is that owning legal citizenship in terms of identification number or birth certificate. And further, the parents have to set up a bank account for the transfer proposed. And we could see from the findings that some children are still uncovered by the benefits. There are two main reasons. First one is the district response, so that the better response from the district government lead to the better outcomes, and documentation issues because they are undocumented, so they could not receive the benefits. And for the documentation issues, one interesting issue is that some of the Papuans are self excluding themselves from obtaining the documentation due to many reasons, not only situation and geographical situations, but also the political and religious motives, as well as some personal reasons. With these conditionalities, the preconditions has significantly contributed by issuing 28,000 new IDs to the Papuans during the implementation of the trial. We could see from here at the very bottom on all districts that the program had covered around 32,000 children out of estimated 42 children eligible for the benefits. And on in terms of time frame, the payment is paid every 6 months. So the parents receive around 90 US dollar per month. And however, there are some challenges in the transfer. For example, the delay in transfer, limited infrastructure, limited bank branches, and then high travel and withdrawal costs due to the geographical situation, and the unfamiliarity with the banking system for the parents. Another big challenge is that the program actually stopped in 2020 because the OTSUS funds were allocated to fund the national sports event where the Papua hosted the event. And coming to reflections, we could take a look that the program actually signifies universal but categorical quasi UCP because it targets specific age group. And also the program is closer to universal at the districts with high OAP population. Somehow with this targeting, there would be less universal to the district where less OAP reside, which potentially increase the issue of inequality between OAP and non-OAP. Another issue is that on the clear and concise definition of OAP, it's it's more of a dilemma whether like it would be hard for the government to identify OAP because of the open-ended definition, or it's actually an opportunity to include more children as OAP, so more children are covered by the benefit. We could take a look at other benefits that target indigenous communities, for example, at the permanent fund dividend in Alaska, and some other benefits. And for the formal conditionality or administrative documentation, it has led to the longer execution of the program because the parents have to fulfill that prerequisite first before receiving the benefits. However, it has led to better demographic records and civil registration. And therefore, the program eliminates a strong correspondence between universality and conditionality. And in terms of time frame, as the benefit is targeted to the children, the best time frame is every month because it relates to the daily consumption, let's say the nutritious food, and then the health needs and well-being needs for the children. However, with the current situation, this time frame is reasonable. However, it still raised the issue of the effectiveness of the transfer when it's dispersed sporadically or is dispersed not every month. And the current transfer method, that setting up bank account and then the parents have to travel to receive the benefits, are costly for both the government and the beneficiaries. Therefore, we could see or we could reflect to better payment method. Let's say through the mobile money, we could take a look in Kenya where mobile money is one of the main use of payment in Kenya. Let's say M-Pesa or PEVR there. And on the financing the program, we have two issues. Is about the financing sustainability because the limited fiscal space of OTSUS. So when other priorities incoming or other allocation is incoming, then shift of allocation could happen, like, for example, in this program, as well as the sustained political commitment for financing the program from the government. And therefore, we need a more sustainable source of funding and stronger commitment from the province. And here is like final part of the presentation is that we proposed and then compare the idea of forest carbon dividend. It's a child basic income is part of the forest carbon dividend, which is funded from the carbon valuation, and it's priced at around $10 per ton. And the forest carbon dividend here have two elements: the elements of citizenship and affirmation. And citizenship is as long as Indonesian citizens, and affirmation reflects to the situation where the indigenous people online and are entitled to their indigenous rights. We could see here the comparison with the forest carbon dividend, because Papua is rich in carbon stocks and rainforest. So this idea, we propose this idea. And here is the dividend in the pilot district. This is per capita dividend, so it's per year. And from the table, we could see that forest carbon dividend is likely more sustainable than other, because as long as the forests are maintained and stabilized, then you could always take the dividend from that. And the amount also is also much larger, more than 5 times compared to Otsus right now. And the thing is that the amount of the CBI depends on the available pool. It depends on the available carbon stocks on each district, so it will be different on each district. On the other side, we could see, if I could take back the PKH, the family hub program, estimatedly covered only 6% of all children aged up to 4 if we conduct the simulations. So in terms of coverage, the program covers children better, but PKH covers not only children, it covers up to the elder people after pension. And yeah, some takeaways from our research are: the first, although the program should be almost universal in the pilot districts, that would be less universal in the districts where non-indigenous people reside more. We could see it probably at the capital district in Jayapura, that would be less universal with the current targeting. Be- because of the current targeting is legitimate because of the sources of fund from uh, from the Otis Fund that is specifically allocated to OAP, but this might be ineffective due to the open-ended definition of OAP and raises the issue of inequality. And the next, the conditionality has led to the longer execution of the program that affects the universality. However, it already gives the significant impact to improve the civil registration and demographic record. Therefore, we could say that the conditionality intertwines with the universality. And in terms of payment, we need a better transfer method because of the high withdrawal cost for them. And we need a more sustainable financing sources and stronger commitment from the government because of the limited space of Otis Fund. And therefore, we proposed the idea of child basic income funded by forest carbon dividend for the financing sustainability. And I think, yes, this is the references that we take from the research, and
Much, Femme.
that's all. Thank you, and feel free to discuss afterwards.
I'd just like to open the Q&A for one quick question before we move on to Mark O'Leary. If not, I just want to say, yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. And it's always really good to learn about the practical on the ground challenges, just with even dispersing the funds and just how important it is to think through that. So I think there are some really good takeaways there from the Indonesian Papua context. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's navigate to Mark's slides, which I believe are at the top. Okay. And then Mark, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Hi. You can hear me? Good. Look, yeah, thanks to BN for providing this platform and for supporting independent voices such as mine. It's a bit about me. I'm an independent researcher with no political affiliations, and I'm actually an IT systems architect by day. But became interested in basic income many years ago, and especially the practicalities of how to pay for a BI and the politics of BI, especially in Australia. So the title of my talk is A Politically Achievable Path to a Basic Income in Australia. I'll just get to my next slide. So a reality check. There's already enough baggage to make a direct pitch to something called basic income just about untenable in Australia. The Labor Party here has regularly slapped it down, and only the Greens embrace the concept, but never more than a throwaway line on the hustings. Whoever is in power, I believe it's actually the language of the right will be more effective in making headway, certainly in Australia. You are a shareholder in your country. You deserve a dividend rather than it's some unconditional right. In the Australian vernacular, it's a fair go, but not a free go. We also need to avoid the standard slapdown of payments to millionaires, and that also comes from the Labor side, ironically. With all that in mind, we need to, in a sense, sneak up on a basic income in Australia in a series of achievable steps over 2 or more electoral cycles. Okay, so as I've pointed out here, Australia is a nation with low property taxation, low consumption taxes, and no price on carbon. Australia's tax take is about 28% of GDP compared to 34% OECD average. There's no land tax on first properties here. There's no carbon tax and limited mining taxes. And we have a low consumption tax of 10% compared to 15% in much of the EU and New Zealand, etc. This presents a unique opportunity to pay for a BI through the redistribution of a series of levies in these areas using a fee and dividend model. Okay, so fee and dividend implies some form of tax or levy returned as an equal dividend to a target population. That is, everyone gets a slice. A good example is in Canada and British Columbia, where the revenue from their carbon tax is returned to all households as dividend and has had popular support for over 10 years. In Australia, a fee and dividend approach could be applied to carbon, mining, property, all these areas to reach the level of a modest BI, as I will show. Now, the carbon tax is not where we would ideally start in Australia, given its toxic political heritage. So stage one of this proposal is a temporary housing affordability benefit scheme, introducing a property value levy and dividend. So we have a housing affordability crisis in this country, and as Winston Churchill once quipped, never let a good crisis go to waste. So the housing affordability benefit scheme would be politically sold as a temporary 1% levy on all residential property to give first home buyers an ongoing benefit to gradually build a deposit rather than today's one-off first home owners grant sugar hit. The political argument is clear, and I believe there would be general support for such a levy. Of course, any perceived, quote, tax on the family home, unquote, will be a very hard sell indeed. Which is why, using a fee and dividend approach, the property value levy would be 100% returned as an equal dividend to all Australians, not just prospective first home buyers. And this would be offset against the predicted dividend, which just means that no one would actually pay the 1% up front. So let me try and explain. Okay, so here's the property wealth distribution in Australia with 10% of households in each column or decile. The bottom 3 deciles represent mainly renters and prospective home buyers with zero property ownership. The top decile represents Australia's wealthiest 10%. So a 1% levy on this $10 trillion property market, it's huge, would raise about $100 billion nationally. So here's that 1% levy shown in pink across those same deciles, and in light blue is how the dividend would be evenly distributed across the population. Okay, and putting levy and dividend together shows how that 100 billion would be split across the 10 deciles, the green representing a net benefit. Okay, so, and here's how that 100 million would finally get divided across Australia's 8.3 million households, resulting in about $12,000 for an average household of 2.6 people. You can see the full benefit going to the first home buyers in the red box there. Okay, I think I've lost my place, sorry. So, just lost my slide there, just let me go back. Okay, so more realistically, here's the benefit across four-person households in New South Wales, from the poorest four-person household to the wealthiest four-person household. The full dividend is about 17K, and note that there's no handout to millionaires, which is one of our key objectives here. That's the group to the right. Also note the broad middle group, that's deciles 4 to 8, already own property but still get a partial dividend. Just keep this picture in mind as we move ahead. We're only at stage 1 of this plan here. So summing up, every residential property attracts the same annual percentage levy, 1%, to pay for housing affordability. The revenue is 100% allocated to every individual Australian as an equal share, but this will be generally grouped by household. For example, a family unit of 4. This would put 17K into the hands of a renting family of 4 in New South Wales. The levy and dividend will be combined into a single quarterly transaction, so most people are never out of pocket. And the cheque is in the mail. This is the approach taken by the government of British Columbia for their dividend payments, to send out a cheque, a great way to create goodwill. And of course, the full benefit goes into the hands of prospective home buyers, which is the point of this part of the scheme. So a bit more on the politics. So politically, struggling homeowners will also get a partial dividend. That's homeowners rather than prospective homeowners. They also get a partial dividend. For example, a family of 4 living in a tiny unit would receive a significant partial dividend to help them upsize over time. In fact, 80% of Australians have less than their fair share of property compared to the richest, and that's 80% who vote. So the government could push the property rights angle to all of this. Property ownership is a right, not a privilege, a birthright, I would say, in fact. We all have the right to a fair share of the nation's property. Even the nation's early settlers received land grants in the 1800s. Okay, so those with more than their fair share have an obligation, I would say a moral obligation, to compensate the rest. Okay, now on to stage 2 of this the scheme I'm proposing here. So with our 2030 carbon emissions target getting closer, the government could now propose a carbon dividend, again return 100% to all Australians as an election commitment. Again, the political argument is clear, and again, there is a win-win situation. The government has helped to reach their 2030 target, and every household sees an even larger benefit each quarter. The population now gets the concept of a dividend, and they like it. Carbon tax, bad. Well, carbon dividend, good. So if re-elected, the carbon dividend would be rolled out in tandem, now under the umbrella of an Australian National Dividend Scheme, which I'll call the ANDS. Unlike the housing affordability scheme we started with, the carbon dividend is conceptually very simple. So there is currently no price on carbon in Australia, so it's almost a no-brainer. The carbon price will be set close to the international carbon market. It's currently about $60 per tonne. The dividend would be about 4K per house for a household of 4. Politically, the electorate would just need to be sold on helping to meet the 2030, 2050 targets. The vast majority of economists are on board with some form of emissions tax as of late 2021, as you can see in that little grab. The companies are still free to trade carbon credits on other markets, so there's no impediment there. Any carbon pricing scheme will, of course, have side effects. For example, inflation pressure, but the fistful of dollars for every citizen is hopefully a political trump card here. Okay, here we see how the carbon dividend overlaid on the property dividend we saw earlier, again for our New South Wales example, and the resulting benefit change to the right. You can see the 4K increase for the majority, and a 4K reduction for anybody who still owes a levy. That's the wealthier end. Okay, so the overall stage 2 of this scheme will be punctuated by a new political message. You are a shareholder in your country. You deserve a dividend. So the original housing affordability scheme now becomes a property ownership dividend. The carbon dividend is now the second line item. We may begin to refer to dividends as a people's tax, and depending on the size of the government mandate, the 1% property levy might be raised to 1.5%, or perhaps this will be deferred to a later stage. Okay, and here we go. Here's the full scheme here. So other dividend schemes will follow in the next few electoral cycles, and I'll quickly walk through these now. So we've got the property and carbon dividends in place. Next would be a resources dividend, a levy on mining super profits. Then we would get to a consumption dividend, which would basically raise the GST to 15% from 10%, but pay that extra 5% back as a dividend. Then we would go for an automation dividend. I have a new take on this, which I'll call a reverse payroll tax, which I'll get to later. And finally, something I've called the welfare dividend. Basically, as the overall ANDS, the dividend scheme payout increases, there's an ever-increasing saving at the same time in previously expensive welfare programs. And this can be rolled back as yet another dividend. Suffice to say that something like 200 billion is spent on welfare in this country today, and 50 to 75% of this will be saved. And drum roll, we have reached something approaching a full basic income of 15k per adult and 7.5k per child. Crucially, there have been no income tax increases and no government deficit to get here. Okay, so this slide shows the final benefit with all those dividends in place. Are now receiving a net benefit. In fact, only 5% of wealthiest households will owe a net levy. So
Hi, are you there, Mark? We can't hear you. Hi, Mark, are you there? Okay, so Mark might be having some technical issues. Okay, so why don't we take a break there, and then we can... Mark, if you're there, just let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we will move on to the next speaker, and then we can come and finish off your session if you can get back online. So, okay, let me just prepare. Okay. All right, let's skip ahead to Yanu Prasetyo. They are at the Research Centre for Population, National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, and they will be speaking on the basic income experiment in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Take it away, Jan.
All right. Can you hear me well?
And thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yanu Prasetyo. I'd like to share our experiment, our pilot experiment in Yogyakarta, Indonesia today. That's very interesting from the previous presentation. I'm really enjoyed, but unfortunately, the Mark presentation must be stopped in the middle of presentation. So I think I will start to move my slides. You can see that. Can you see it moving?
Thank you.
So yeah, this research actually kind of independent research have done by some collaboration among researchers and also non-government organization, a local government in Yogyakarta, some universities, and so on. So I will start with the three topics we will discuss this afternoon. The first thing is about the Yogyakarta Basic Income Pilot itself, and then how do we do it, and then some of the preliminary findings. Actually, today is the first time we share some of our results from this pilot. So what is Yogyakarta Basic Income Pilot? We call it in Indonesia, in Bahasa is Jamesta Istimewa. which is the another name for Universal Basic Income Guarantee. And this is the first crowdfunding-based basic income experiment in Yogyakarta and Indonesia. So it's not from the government or from non-government funding from the experiment, but from the people, from the small donors, and we call it crowdfunding-based basic income experiment. And why we choose basic income guarantee as our pilot, because we still need some evidence. Actually, in the first presentation today talk about the Papua, Indonesian Papua. That's also interesting. This one in Yogyakarta, in Java Island, where the most populated population in Indonesia, and we choose basic income in our pilot project because we want to see how this free money for everyone can change their life, or can what this kind of experiment can do to the people, whether they will be lazy or when they're receiving free money, or it's just a myth, something like that, and other questions related to productivity, mental health, general health, and others variables. And also because this is a pilot, we want to see if we find some obstacles or challenges when we trying to do the bigger experiment in the future. And why Yogyakarta? Because it has a unique socio-demographic characteristic and settings. It's a very popular as a college student city friendly with hundreds of university, and also a city of art and culture with attract millions of tourists from all from the world every year. And also this area have a low minimum wage level compared to other provinces in Indonesia. And it's very famous with the cheapest cost of living in Yogyakarta. I mean, if we do this experiment, we will need, we will have enough resources to do experiment in Yogyakarta because of these reasons as well. So we started our experiment last year in November and ended in April this year in 6 consecutive months. And we're also doing this during the pandemic situation, so that will be a very huge variable will affect our experiment as well. And then we recruit the participants through the online and open form distributed to the public in Yogyakarta. It's very, very simple. There is no, there's only one, if you are living in Yogyakarta, whether you have an ID of Yogyakarta or not, it doesn't matter. You can participate in this experiment. But if you hold a Yogyakarta ID card, but you live outside Jogja in this period of experiment, you cannot register as a participant. And we got the support from the kitabisa.com. It's actually the charity-based platform, the biggest one in Indonesia right now, and also some enthusiastic basic income supporter and volunteer in Yogyakarta. And yeah, this one is anyone who lives in Yogyakarta can participate in this experiment. And this is the distribution of the registrants in 5 regions of Yogyakarta province. Yogyakarta itself have like 3.7 million population, but we got like 2,100 participants registered in our experiment. And then we select 100 participants, 25 as a recipient or as a treatment group, and then the 75 people as a control group. And then this is the platform we use to fundraising and to collect the money from the people. We got like 8,273 US dollar from 247 donors. I think that's a good sign for kind of crowdfunding for a pilot project in Indonesia, because it's kind of new and I don't think people is really familiar with basic income itself. But we succeed to get $1,000 from 247 small donors, and I think we got one big donor as well, giving their money to this pilot. And then we transfer 33 US dollar, around like 500,000 rupiah, to 25 recipients for 6 consecutive months from November to April 2022. And then we data collection use surveys with self-reported method, and then the interview, and we make some documentary films as well. And then the payment through there is no fee using that application as well. So we use the Wheel of Fortune to do the selection for the randomization of the 100 participants from 2,100 registrants. So, and it's online, and it's a live stream through YouTube channel. So you can see in the link there as well. If you want to see the whole process, how we get, or how we select the 100 participants in this pilot. It's all this the stages and the dates, activities that we did in the pilot from November to April. And then some of the preliminary findings, actually, demographically, 60% of the participants in this pilot are female, and then 53% of them are single or never married, and 43% participants have graduated from college, and 42% only up to the high school. So this kind of like millennials or some demographic characteristic unique in Yogyakarta, as we see earlier, and then 54% of them still live with their parents, and only 10% live in their own houses. This is kind of another issues in Indonesia right now, when millennials really hard to buy a house for this time. And then we trying to see from many different variables and dimension, but today maybe we can share just some of them with all of you. For example, we trying to see there. So we have like a 4 survey wave during the experiments. One before they receive basic income, and the other 3 after they receive basic income. And from this analysis, we can see that this one is all the result from 100 participants, but when we break down to the treatment group and the control group, we can see that there is a slightly difference. Although in statistical analysis it's not really significant, but we can see from this descriptive analysis that there is some difference between treatment and control in terms of the productivity before they are receiving basic income and after they're receiving basic income. The treatment group have somewhat or much productive compared to the control group. And another, like the perception of personal financial condition before and after the basic income pilot, the treatment group also have somewhat or much more stable perception on their financial condition compared to the control group. And then change perception, difficulty in paying debts. This is the huge issue in a household, different individuals in Indonesia. There is a lot of problem with the debts, and we can see that in the treatment group as well. They have more or much less difficult to pay their debts compared to the control group who didn't receive basic income payment. And then change in the frequency of fights with the partners. I mean, this is indicators. We can see if there is a household with a problem with their partners or even with their spouse. You can see from here that the treatment group as well have much less frequently fight with their partners compared to the control group. And then change in frequency in the food security aspect, like in the hunger experience, we can see also that basic income basic income payment, even in the small or tiny amount, can still help people to reduce their experience on the hunger. Like they feel like much less hungry in their 6-month experiment. And then in the satisfaction with current life compared to the basic before the basic income as well, there is a slightly difference and between the treatment and the control group. And then in the pride in life achievement, it's kind of like how they look into their life after joining this pilot. That's also slightly different compared to the control group. And you can also always see in the middle here in the about the same, that is the biggest one in both of the control group and treatment group, because in the pandemic situation, that will be very difficult for everyone. Even if you give them some additional money, that's not really can help them out from their real problem during the pandemics due to the social restriction and the economic crisis at all. But if you can stay the same or about the same with the situation like you have before the pandemic, there will be some achievement, small achievement from the basic income experiment. And this is the general health. Like if you compare with the other people same age with you, they feel like yeah, better. The treatment group feel much more healthier than the other in the control group. And then the resilience, like feeling recover from stress faster as well. They have more, much faster in treatment group compared to those in control group. So this kind of initial indication that more basic income recipient have slightly better improvement and about the same status compared to the control group, because many people will falling down during the pandemic, having a hardship and severance. It's an indication that basic income, even a tiny amount, may serve as social cushion from the worsening situation for most people due to the pandemic. And then in the qualitative part, we did the interview as well with the participant. That's interesting that they do some charity and donation right after they receive the payment, and it's ranging from $3 to $6.6 just for the charity and donation. This is interesting. This is like culturally embedded in Yogyakarta as well. That they also use the money for sharing with others, parents, relatives, friends, through buying food or doing daily shopping, something like that, which means like they don't only think about their needs but also those around them. I mean, they can still be generous even in difficult times. And then in the first 2 months of payment, the recipient uses a huge part of their money they receive from this payment to help people outside themselves. However, along the way, then in the third month, fourth month, until the 6th month, they gradually reduce this external spending and begins to focus on meeting his or her own needs or personal priorities. So they're trying to be more focused on themselves along the way with the payment in 6 consecutive months. And then they also find more confidence and uh, dare to dream big. Compared to the previous month when they receive in two first month or in the fourth first month of the experiment, and then in the 6th month of the experiment or at the end of the experiment, now they can think beyond just financial problem or just wanting to paying off them their debts. They have more bigger dream in their mind after they joining the pilot. So this also the initial indication, small payment and short duration of the experiment may be the factors that causing almost all statistical tests. If we did the statistical test, uh, there's no significant effect on basic income directly to the recipient. However, well, we still find slightly different situation between uh, control group and the treatment group. And also the situation of a pandemic and unstable economy is also factors that uh, maybe just this small amount, $33 or 500,000 rupiah, is only give you just small, caution from the shock, but not being able to make your economic status better than before. And that's maybe some of the sharing from our preliminary findings. And also we will launch our documentary film and testimonials from the recipients and for participants of this pilot as well soon. So yeah, I think that's all from me. Thank you so much, and I'll give back the forum to the moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yanu. That was really insightful, and it's great that you have so many filmed elements from filming the methodology and having this documentary. I do want to get to questions later, but I do want to touch base with Mark. Are you back with us?
I am back with you. Can you hear me?
Okay, brilliant. So why don't you go back to the slide you were last on, and we'll finish off your session, and then we'll head straight into question time.
Okay.
You have about 5 minutes left on your session. If that's okay, then we can get to questions as well. We have a few lined up already.
I can't see my slides at the moment.
let me just bring them up. Where were we? Let's see. Is that the one we were?
Yes.
Yeah.
Quickly get back into it. So I'm not sure what people heard of that, but I'll just go to the bottom line there. Literally, crucially, I've just said with these 5 dividend schemes in place, brought in over a number of electoral cycles. We've reached the equivalent of a basic income of 15k per adult, 7.5k for 12 per child, and crucially, there's been no income tax increases and no government deficit to get here. Now, this slide shows the final benefit with all those dividends in place. 9 out of 10 households are now receiving a full benefit, and only 5% of households will owe a net levy. So no handout to millionaires, which is one of the main drivers of this. Now, UBI purists, and I've seen a question in the chat here, may feel uncomfortable with the lack of you in this scheme. Clearly, the ANS is conditional on a property ownership levy, which only means that property owners that own large amounts of property are the ones, in fact, basically funding some proportion of the scheme. I can only say that a flat property tax is about as tamper-proof as we can hope to get, given that similar systems have been in place for generations with council rate systems. Now, given I've lost a bit of time here, I'm going to have to fly through here. I'll just mention these other dividends quickly. So stage 3 brings us to a consumption dividend. The proposal is that Australia's 10% GST will continue to go to the 7 states, and I can't see this changing, but an additional 5% would be 100% returned as a dividend. Now, this table here shows the actual effect on this across the population. And to put it simply, the rich spend a lot more and pay a lot more GST than the poor. So if you can see column Q1 there, our sort of poorest family pays $7,500 in GST each year, but gets back 5,000, nearly 2/3. So their effective GST actually reduces to 5%. Looking at column 5, our wealthiest family actually ends up with an effective GST of 12%. Crucial. So it's crucial to the political argument is that the GST effectively becomes a progressive tax, and currently it's a 10% flat tax. Again, I can't do it justice here with limited time, but okay. But so stage 3 would also introduce an effective mining super profits tax, which so we had such a tax 7 or 8 years ago, which was repealed, and I think people can understand what's going to happen there. There's going to be a new resources dividend based on the same royalties, but this would go straight back to families directly benefiting from the mining sector. Okay, so and an automation dividend. So this is perhaps a little bit out of keeping with the rest of this discussion, but we would introduce some form of levy on automation. Now, the way I've had some interesting thoughts about this. Basically, the idea I want to put forward is a reverse payroll tax. Companies pay tax on people they do not employ. So I'll think of a worker, Joe, churning out products worth twice his salary. That's a leverage factor of 2. A pretty good outcome for his boss, but look at, say, something like Google, where the revenue per employee might be $10 million versus a typical salary of say 200k, a leverage factor of 50. It's as if there's 49 employers are working for free. So jumping to that, so companies would be required to report revenue per employee, etc., and put simply, labour-intensive companies will pay less tax, and highly automated companies will pay more tax, and households will pick up a slice of this in an automation dividend. Okay, so we're almost there. So here's the summary slide again, and I'll just make a few points. The final ANDS provides 15k, as we talked about, and the property levy is, as I mentioned, baked into the scheme. I'm not going to apologise for that. There would be also a deferral of levies for older Australians in compensation to avoid any double taxes that might occur with this scheme. And I've done a lot of deeper analysis on the savings to the welfare system, but to suffice to say that lifting all boats and including children as beneficiaries means that all current targeted welfare, that's from job seeker to family tax benefits, can be scaled back accordingly without any, any impact on recipients. The scheme has been thoroughly worked through, I should add, but there's no doubt complexity yet to be confronted, hopefully outweighed politically by the net benefit that 95% of the population will receive through this. Okay, so now what I present is a snapshot of much more comprehensive analysis that I can't do justice to here, but hopefully the core idea is there on that, which I'll go back to that slide. I've stayed on that slide, haven't I? Sorry. Hey, so hopefully that sets it all out exactly what I'm proposing here. So that's really all I've got to say here. I've seen another question here relating to land theft from the First Nations people. What we're talking about here is residential property being the source of the income, not the target of the income. So the target would be every individual person across the nation, whether you're so whether your household is a traditional inner city household, or that household is in a different terms, is anybody in the country. So this does not address the theft of land, but it does certainly share the wealth that is locked up in residential property around Australia to everybody. And I think I'll just go back to that earlier slide here, shows that the net benefit is, although it's not unconditional, if unconditional income would be all 10 boxes would be the same. It is slightly conditional on property ownership, which kicks in from deciles number 4 to 10. But again, the slapdown that we get in Australia is no payments to millionaires, just knocks basic income out of the park. So that's why I've taken this approach. Anyway, I think I'm probably running out of time. So
thank you so much, Mark. And thank you for your patience with our system. Appreciate you coming back on and being able to finish off your slides. So I did see that you did touch on the first question that came to you on conditionality. If anyone still has some questions on conditionality, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. However, I do want to turn back to Femme and yeah, we'll try to get to all those questions. So I do want to quickly turn to Femme and Yanu. I do just have a question about what did you learn from each other's presentations today? Any key thoughts or learnings, and any opportunity for partnering together, given that you're both in Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if I could draw a conclusion briefly, it's very interesting because basically in general Indonesia, in terms of social protection and cash transfer, currently the most popular model is the targeted and conditional. So it's nice to see, and it's great to see some other trials that is unconditional or targeting like more universal, that all element of the society like could get. So the possibility is high, like in promoting the basic income for all elements in of the societies in Indonesia. So it's interesting to shift from the targeted and conditional into the more universal and unconditional one.
Great, thank you. All right, so just switch back to video view. Yanu, anything else to add to that before we go back to our last question for this session?
I think I agree with Femme that we need to give more alternative to the government, that there is another option to strengthen our social protection system in Indonesia. But I think Indonesia now have a couple of examples. Now from Papua, we have universal child benefit experience. In Jogja, we have a small pilot for basic income. And then now we're also running kind of blockchain-based basic income in Bali as well. So this will be very interesting to see in the future, like how this kind of alternatives and different way to build our new economy in Indonesia from the grassroots. I think that will be really good experience for Indonesia. Thank you.
And Mark, in 30 seconds, how are you able to respond to the fact that multiple people in Parliament, multiple property owners?
I think all we can say is that's a challenge that we always face, is that that politicians also have self-interest. But that's the reason I started with a housing affordability benefit scheme, which was fairly just sitting at 1%, which means that you start off with a lead-in program which nobody can really argue with, and it's not too much of an impact on everybody. But that's when you want to ramp that up from 1% to 1.5% or 2%, that it becomes a challenge. Certainly, I'm not going to deny that. There was also one about.
I'm so sorry, but we are at time. I really appreciate everyone's presentations today, and we will catch you in the next sessions. Thank you so much.